So here what I'm doing is I'm capitalizing off of the same thing that I did in the last video, where I want to speed up so that I get to my fourth slot turn as soon as possible. So I put a ranger in slot 2. But in the last video, because I didn't have anything in the back row, I ended up dying pretty quick. And even though here it doesn't get far enough into the battle, you could see how even when the enemy gets through my front row, now it's got a back row of masters. Although keep in mind that the enemy back row here does have a sure hit skill, which is 40%. And also here, there is a higher chance now for my slot 3 to get hit. The enemy has Walker Awakening. So after it takes out my slot 2 1 ranger, since I put a troop behind it, when the enemy back row hits, there's a possibility that it will proc Walker Awakening and Sonar. And if it does that, it will take out the singles in my back row, and it will actually hit my slot 3 and do damage. Before that, I hadn't left it open. And so here, I leave the back row open, and with this formation, you could actually send a lower tier to this particular NPC in slot 3. Like, let's say you don't have a lot of tier 5. And so what you could do is you could, send what you have in slot 1. Even if you need to, you could stick 1 in slot 1. Although that's much more dangerous. And as long as, because the enemy here, its awakening is a Walker Awakening, as long as I don't put anything in slots 5 or 6, the enemy cannot hit my slot 3. Unless it goes through my slot 1. But what would likely happen first is it would go through my slot 2 and 3. That's the path of least resistance. Also, nothing's damaging those enemy slots, so they stay at full power throughout the battle. So here I'm upping the risk, theoretically just lowering the healing bill, honestly. Which, if you have enough troops, and let's say it's Nemesis of the Empire event, you're gonna want to make your losses as close to 0, or not necessarily as close to 0 because I'm sacrificing rangers here, but as close to worthless as possible. And for me, I'll sacrifice 2 rangers every single fight rather than a master every 3 fights. This is my favorite formation. This is what I use for monster hunting as long as I have first strike. And I am risking those 2 rangers every single time. They're gonna die every single time. But that's due to the probability of the enemy getting a sure hit skill in the first round. It's pretty high. You got 20% in the front row and 40% in the back row. It's more likely than not your front row, especially slots 2 and 3, will get hit by a sure hit skill. So because of that, I'd rather just put a ranger each in the front row, and if it breaks through, I've got the master there that there's a 60% chance, by the time it gets to the master, there's a 60% chance that I'll make it out okay. There's a 40% chance that it's going to be a sure hit skill. Of course, what this does do is it guarantees that the enemy will eat through your rangers, so the enemy slot 2 and slot 3 will eat through your rangers. You can, another instance where you could send 1 tier lower is you could send just the first slot. And That's a little riskier than sending tier 5 at the enemy, because if you don't kill slot 1, then the enemy slot 1 will go, and keep in mind that it has a bonus 40% chance to hit you, because it is 1 tier higher. The T5 is 1 tier higher than the T4. But provided you take out slot 1, as long as you do that, it doesn't matter if you win or lose, because what's going to happen next is the enemy slot 2 is going to go, and it's going to send your troops home. Just beware, though, if you do send 2 tiers lower. I mean, you could send tier 1 stuff if you want, but it's going to get hit every single time. So if you don't field enough, say, tier 3 to take out slot 1, this is even riskier than sending just tier 4, because it will hit you every single time.